بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وبارك على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. So alhamdulillah, we can continue where we left off from كتاب النكاح for ዑمدة الفقه by Ibn Qudāmah raḥimahullah, and we go on to the next chapter, next section for محرمات في النكاح, those that are prevented or those that are impermissible to marry in the nikah. And this particular chapter largely is based upon the ayah and Surah An-Nisa, where Allah Ta'ala mentions حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمْ وَأُمَّهَاتُكُمْ وَبَنَاتُكُمْ وَأَخَوَاتُكُمْ وَعَمَّاتُكُمْ وَخَالَاتُكُمْ بَنَاتُ الْأَخِ وَبَنَاتُ الْأُخْتِ وبنات الأخ وبنات الأخت وأمهاتكم اللاتي أودعنكم وأخواتكم من الرضاعة وأمهات نسائكم وربائكم اللاتي في حجوركم من نسائكم اللاتي دخلتم بهن فإن لم تكونوا دخلتم بهن فلا جناح عليكم وحلائل أبنائكم الذين من أصلابكم وأن تجمعوا بين أختين إلا ما قد سلف. And so here this ayah illustrates who Allah Ta'ala knows best are the individuals that are not permissible to marry. So it begins with حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمْ أُمُّهَاتُكُمْ. So ummahat. And so the mothers, first and foremost. So the first of them that I mentioned are the mothers. It's impermissible to marry from the mothers. Thereafter, it mentions وَبَنَاتُ وَبَنَاتُكُمْ, and your daughters. And this is reference, when it refers to the daughters, it's referring to the daughters and anyone descending from that. Nasab. So the daughters or the granddaughters or the great-granddaughters. So it's not permissible to marry for anyone from them. Thereafter it mentions وَالْأَخَوَاتِ وَأَخَوَاتُكُمْ. So it's not permissible to marry from the sisters. Now this impermissibility of the sisters is one which is it's general. So irrespective of whether it's the shaqiqat referring to who? If it's your ukht shaqiqa, the full sister now. So the sister that where you share both the mother and father, or if it's ukht li'ab or ukht li'um, all of them are entered within this prohibition. So whether it's the sister, this full sister, the sister where you share both the same mother and father, or it's your sister with the same father, or the sister with the same mother, or just the same father, or just the same mother, Thereafter, so this is our fourth one, are the banat al-ikhwa wa banat al-akhawat. So the daughters of the brothers and the daughters of the sisters, based on the ayah, banat al-akhi wa banat al-ukh. And the daughters of the akh, so the daughters of the brother and the daughters of the sister, essentially what we refer to as the niece. Then we have the fifth category, which is the ammat. The ammat. So these are the paternal aunts. As for the daughter of the ammat, so the daughters of the paternal aunts, then they do not enter into this tahrim. So the daughters of the paternal aunts are not regarded as being haram. Thereafter it mentions the khalat. يعني أخوات الأم, the sisters of the mother. This is number 6. The sisters of the mother are the khalat. So our maternal aunts, they also are impermissible. And likewise, their daughters are not, do not enter into this, yeah, tahrim as well. They do not enter into it. Now, thereafter mentions ummuhatu nisaikum. Now, so number 7, the ummuhatu nisa'i. Now, so this is referring to the mothers of the wives. The mothers of the wives. And it mentions the mothers. Well, again, what's understood from that is, what is ascending from that as well. So mothers, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, grandmothers. All of them enter into this tahrim. Thereafter, you have the hala'il, aba, wa abna. So what enters into that as well? The hala'il aba, wal abna. This is referring to the zawjatul ab. So your the father's wife. Naam. And Shaykh Fawzan, he mentions that this tahrim is established by majarad al-aqd. So as soon as the contract is established, then this tahrim begins. It's not permissible for the man to marry his father's wife as soon as the father's made a contract with her. Naam. And this is a tahrim or tahriman mu'abbadan. So it's a tahrim which is permanent. And we'll go through some which are not permanent, but all of them up to this point are all permanent. Naam. And so this, as we mentioned, is based upon the fact that, or begins from the point where there is a contract made, irrespective of whether the marriage is consummated. Now, irrespective of whether the marriage is consummated, as soon as that contract has been agreed, then this woman now becomes haram for him. Is that clear, barakallahu feekum? Now, the woman becomes haram for him at the point of the contract being agreed. So, thereafter, it mentions raba'ib or raba'ib madkhul bi ummuhatihim. And so, it's referring to the bint to zawja. So the rabiba is referring to the bint to zawja, the daughter of the wife. So now, if a person is to marry an individual, for example, a man marries a woman and she has a daughter, naam, that daughter is referred to as the rabiba. Naam, the rabiba. And this tahrim is after the consummation. So this tahrim is after the consummation. So the previous category you mentioned was what? I don't remember. But what was the case? It was permanent, but what was the situation though? But who was it though? So that's my point. Who was it? The father's wife. Now, so the father's wife, then the tahrim begins with what? With the aqd al-nikah. In this case now, we're referring to who? The wife's daughter. Now, the wife's daughter. And this tahrim is upon the consummation of the marriage. Now, but upon the consummation of the marriage. آية وربائبكم اللاتي في حجوركم من نسائكم اللاتي دخلتم بهن فإن لم تكونوا دخلتم بهن فلا جناح عليكم. And so it's referring to these the raba'ib, yani where you've entered the home of the women and consummated the marriage with these women. Then in that regard, these daughters are now yani haram for the individual to marry. So thereafter, Ibn Qudāmah mentions as well, يحرم من الرضاع ما يحرم من النسب. So everything that is haram by way of lineage, so general relation or blood relation, if you like, is also haram by way of suckling. Naam. I will mention the breastfeeding, some of the ahkam in relation to it in more detail in the next chapter, inshallah. And so, if now, for example, a person is your ukht min al-rada'a, so the person, this woman, is your sister by way of the breastfeeding, so you breastfed from the same woman, then marriage to such an individual is now not permissible. Likewise, if a person breastfed from a particular woman, then it's not permissible to marry from her. So, if now, for example, a man, or as a child, of course, he breastfed from a woman, is he permitted to marry her sister? No? Question clear? Sorry, can you repeat it? No. Nah, so the woman, a man he as a child he breastfed from a woman, and now he's older, he wishes to marry. Is he permitted to marry that woman's sister? There are 2 yeses and 1 no. Yes. You can't ask a tafsir and not answer the question. No. Yeah? اختلف أهل العلم. Ahmed was adamant though, he said no. Adamant. No. So who said you said no? You said no. Why?
Because the last name, which is whoever is forbidden with lineage or forbidden with something, then it's his auntie.
She's auntie. Okay. Tamam, okay. Who says yes? Father Sufyan will explain.
Because you're saying maybe the woman's daughter also breastfed from the same woman. Now that you can marry the daughter, but maybe the aunt, her sister may be different.
So I was saying the sister, can you marry her sister? You're saying it's different. Okay, you're saying there's a difference. Okay. Anyone can explain further that says yes? Ahlu, yes? No. I think there's a reason why you can't explain further, because it's not the case. No. Essentially, if now the person suckles from the woman, then that essentially says if that woman is who? The mother. Taib, it's as if that's the mother. So all of the ahkam that revolve around the mother refer to her. Naam. So her sister would be would be as if it's her khala. Naam. And so then it wouldn't be able to marry the sister. Does that make sense? Taib. And so this is the point that Ibn Qudāmah he mentions, that all of the points in relation, or all of the points that relate to nasab also relate to rada'a. No, further. Her daughter. Will we have to marry her?
No, right?
No, it wouldn't be able to marry her. No, no. Allah Ta'ala knows best. Taib. Thereafter it mentions والبنات محرمات ومحرمات إلا بنات العمات وخالات. So now it's referring to the banat, of those that are haram. So anyone that is regarded as being from the categories of those that are haram are also haram. They're banat, they're daughters. So for example, the daughters of the mother are haram. Well, sisters anyway. Naam. Daughters of the sister. Naam. So it's all of them except for the ammat wa khalat. So the daughters of the paternal aunts and the daughters of the paternal, or the maternal aunts, sorry. The paternal and maternal aunts. Their daughters are not haram in terms of marriage. So essentially, from what is ma'ruf, the first cousins. The first cousins are not haram in terms of marriage. So, and now, also mentions as well the raba'ib, as you mentioned earlier. So, as for the next point, then Ibn Qudāmah, he mentions as well that man wati'a imra'atan halalan aw haraman haramat ala abihi wa ibnihi. So now, if an individual has relations with a woman, and he mentions halalan or haraman, then that woman now is haram upon his father and his son. So here he mentions the sexual relations, halalan wa haraman. What do you mean? What is meant by halalan and haraman? Akramakumullah. Halalan and haraman. Sorry? Zina. So the halalan, of course, is the marriage, and the haram, zina. Tayyib. That's one way. What else can be referred to as the haram as well? Oh, naam, that he's had relations in a manner which is an opposition to the Sharia. Now, so for example, a woman is haid, woman's menstruating. No, it's haram. Lineage, how do you mean? You're on the right track, but then not necessarily just lineage, but what then? How can something be haram? And then they do a marriage contract? When they're unaware. So then what we're getting at then, if they don't do a marriage contract and there's one of these things are relevant, then what does that mean about the marriage contract? Naam, is it valid? So when we say the haram could be the obvious, which is the zina, but the haram could also be that the person has entered into a contract which is not valid. Now, to enter into a marriage contract which is not valid, and it could be a litany of reasons why that could be the case. Now, it's not just necessarily that the person marries the person that was haram for them to marry, but they could have entered into the contract which was inaccurate anyway. For example, a contract without the wali. Now, this is what is meant by the haram. So the halal and the haram. Ala-kullin, the point here that Ibn Qudāmah is mentioning is that if the person was to have relations with the woman in the halal or the haram, irrespective of whether it's a halal or the haram, then it is not permissible for his son or his father to marry that woman. Now, he mentions it's not permissible for the father or the son to marry that woman. And likewise, that woman, her mother or mothers, we say mothers in plural, referring to suckling the lineage, or the grandmothers as well. So anyone from the mothers or in Allah, then it's not permissible. And as well, the banat. No one from the banat, no one from the daughters is permissible. And that's including the daughters, granddaughters, great-granddaughters. Naam. So thereafter, Ibn Qudāmah goes on to mention the chapter or the sub-chapter referring to the jam' bayn al-ukhtayn. Naam. And this is a subchapter due to the fact that this now we're referring to a tahrim which is mu'akkad, or muqayyad. It's something which is restricted. Previously, the tahrim was mu'abbad. It's something which is permanent. So a person, for example, of course, permanently they wouldn't be able to marry their sisters, or permanently they wouldn't be able to marry the mother through suckling. This is all permanent. Now we're referring to something which is restricted for a specific reason. And from those restrictions is the marriage where you make jam' bayna ukhtayn. So a person marries two sisters at the same time. Naam. So you have tahrim, which is mu'abbad, and tahrim, which is ghayr mu'abbad. And jam' bayna ukhtayn is ghayr mu'abbad. Meaning that if, for example, a man was to divorce the woman, then her sister is now halal for him to marry. And also divorce a woman, then the sister is now halal for him to marry. And likewise, a person cannot make jump between the mar'a or ammatiha wa khalatiha. So you cannot now marry a woman at the same time as being married to her paternal aunt or her maternal aunt. But is this mu'abbad or ghayr mu'abbad? اختلفتم. So a person marries a woman. We know he cannot marry this woman's aunt, paternal aunt or maternal aunt. Is that now mu'abbad or ghayr mu'abbad? Is it something which is permanent or temporary? You say ghayr. It's like her sister. What are we saying, Ikhwan? What's our conclusion? Ahmedo's saying what we say with chest. Muhammad Barik. So a person marries the woman. We know, one thing we know is that he cannot marry the paternal aunt and the maternal aunt. The question is now, is this tahrim, is it something which is permanent or temporary? Temporary. No, temporary. It's temporary. So in a scenario where he was to divorce the woman, then he's permitted to now marry that woman's paternal aunt or maternal aunt. Naam. Wala bas. So, and this is due to what was found in the Sunnah of the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, where he mentioned لا يجمع بين المرأة وعمتها عفوا ولا بينها وبين خالاتها. That a person does not combine between a woman and her maternal or her paternal aunt, nor between her and her maternal aunt. Now, why do you think we have such a ruling? Why is a ruling referring to the عدم الجمع بين أختين وعدم الجمع بين المرأة وعمتها نعم وخالاتها وعماتها وخالاتها? Why is there this particular ruling? What's the hikmah essentially? It's quite obvious one. Yeah, essentially. Now, that it can be from the wasa'il of taqatu'. It can be from the means of breaking family ties. Because that which occur and that which exists between a wife and a husband, or between wives, is the degree of ghira. Now that jealousy. So now to increase upon that, this matter of there being that family tie, their siblings, then this is a means of, or something which may bring about a greater form of taqatu', breaking of those family ties between the siblings. And so this is why we have such a ruling. So as for the free individual, So the one that is not the slave. As for the free individual, then it's permissible for him to make jam'. فللحر أن يجمع بين عفوا ولا يجوز للحر أن يجمع بين أكثر من 4 نسوة. It's not permissible for the free individual to have more than 4 wives. So for the individual that is free, meaning what? Quite simply that he's not a slave, then he cannot have more than 4 wives. He cannot make great jump between more than 4 wives. As for the slave, anyone know how many? 2. So the slave cannot have more than 2. طيب فلا يزيد الحر على 4. طيب as for the time of Jahiliyyah, then there was no qayd, there's no restriction in that regard. There was no restriction in terms of ta'addud. And so what you'd find is that maybe a man قد يتزوج كثيرات, they would be married to many women. فلما أسلموا, then when they embraced Islam, the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam made them choose 4 from amongst their wives. And to let the remainder go. To leave the remainder. And what's the proof for that? That the 4 are the 4 is the had, is the limit. Surah An-Nisa, فانكحوا ما طاب لكم من النساء مثنى ثلاث وأربعة. And so to marry those which you see good from amongst the good of the women, 2, 3, or 4. 2, 3, or 4. And Ahlul-Ilm, they make istikhraj as well. They derive from this particular ayah the fact that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala begins by mentioning which number? 2. And that the mention of 2 before the 1 is an indication that ta'addud, so it's 2, 3, 4, indication that ta'addud, the polygyny, is the asl. Now the polygyny is the asl, is the foundation in this regard. If a person is not able to fulfill the justice, then he will suffice with 1. What is understood by way of being just in this regard? What's understood by that? Now, to be just in finances, time, and physical justice as well. It does not refer to the justice in terms of mahabba. The justice in terms of mahabba, that a man has to love one wife equally to the other. Why? Because this is something that is not in his control. As for his tatbiq of Islam, his implementation of Islam and the ahkam of Islam and implementation of justice in that regard, then upon him is to be just in every way, shape, and form. And so this is what is meant by justice, and not that that it's upon that husband to have love for the wife, or have love for each and every one of the wives in an equal manner. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala knows best. Now,
In regards to spending as well, because someone may be here or someone may be abroad. We would have to give them the exact same amount, or would it be like equivalent to where they are.
No. So when it comes to the spending, inshallah we'll mention this in further detail in future chapters. When it comes to the spending upon the spouse, it's not about the quantity per se or the financial quantity. Because, for example, now let's say you gave the example of two countries. Let's say they're in the same country, but one household has one child, other household has 5 children, and you say, okay, we have to spend the same money that I spend on this household with one child that I spend on the one with 5. No, it's about making sure that they are fulfilled and they have that which is that can suffice them within each of the households. Now, and the example you gave, of course, if they're living in one land which is the taklifat, where ma'isha, the living standards are higher or cost more than in another country, then of course what you spend physically is going to be different. So it's about making sure that everyone's needs are fulfilled. Now, type thereafter, Ibn Qudāmah goes on to mention, ومن طلق امرأة فنحها أختها أو خالاتها أو خامسة في عدتها لم يصح سواء كان الطلاق رجعيا أو بائنا. And so, if now a man was to divorce a woman and marry his sister, or marry her sister, so he divorces the woman and marries her sister, or he was to marry a 5th woman, whilst one of his wives was still in her iddah, then this talaq or this marriage is not correct, irrespective of whether the talaq was done with the talaq raj'iyya, where he's able to take her back, or the talaq ba'in, where he's not able to take her back. Is that clear? So a person divorces the woman, and this woman now is still within her iddah period. It doesn't matter what the iddah period is. It doesn't matter whether that iddah period is one where he can take her back, or whether it's an iddah period where he cannot take her back. So she's still in her iddah period. He's not now permitted to marry her sister. Naam, he's not permitted to marry her sister until what? The iddah period elapses. Nor is he permitted to marry a 5th one. So imagine he's married to 4, he divorces 1. But that one he's divorced is still in the iddah period. Naam, he's not now permitted to marry a 5th until that iddah period has elapsed. So when we're referring to the tahrim, which is غير mu'abbad, it still applies until that iddah period has come to an end. Because the iddah period signifies the absolute end of the marriage. So the absolute end of the marriage. Why does it refer to the both types of iddah though? Why? Because why isn't it possible for a person to say that let's say a person says, well, this woman, she's been divorced for the 3rd time, why can't you just not marry again? Because he's not able to marry her again, take her back. So why is this now a case of he has to wait till her iddah comes to an end? Is the question clear? You have to give her rights. Technically, you're still married to her. Okay. All correct. It's not all the answer I'm looking for, but it's all correct. Okay. Nah, this is the answer I'm looking for. And then? Exactly. And then now that means the iddah period has become extended. So now from the purpose of the iddah period is to ascertain whether the woman is pregnant or not. So now, if, for example, within that time, the iddah period is discovered that she is pregnant, the iddah period is no longer those 3 months, but it's up to when she gives birth. It's up to when she gives birth. And so that's an even longer period of time. And now she gives birth to his child. For example, now he has even more responsibility. It may not be possible that he could marry that sister, her sister, or marry this 5th woman that he tend to marry. or whatever the circumstance may be. Now, Allah Ta'ala knows best, whatever the circumstance may be. But now it's a case of there is not now a clean break from that situation. So you have to ascertain whether this the iddah period has come to an end or not, or when it's going to end, irrespective of what that iddah period is. That's with the ba'in. As for the talaq, where the man's able to take the wife back, then that's obvious. If it's obvious, what's the answer? So he can take her back. So then it's possible that he ends up taking her back, or it's possible that they can reconcile in that time. So of course, now if he reconciles, he can't reconcile in that time, and then he's end up married his sister. No, it's not possible. Or now he's got a fifth wife there hanging about. No, it's not possible. So he has to ascertain that the whole situation has come to an end, one way or the other. Now, barakallahu fikum. So, and so, as mentioned, when the woman's in that iddah period, she's still regarded as being within the marriage. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. Thereafter, we have the mention of some parts in relation to the slavery again. We mentioned it just in brief, as we always mention. This is not something that is completely relevant to many people's situation. When I say many people, I mean everybody, I guess. But now, it's not permissible, or rather, it is permissible to own. The person owns two sisters. So a person, he's a slave master and he owns two sisters. However, as a slave master, he's only permitted to have relations with one of the two. Now, so when it comes to the slave master owning two sisters, is permissible. As for the relations, sexual relations, and it can only be with one of the two. So, and once he has the relations with one, then the second has now become haram for him. Now to have relations with. So then this is the case. So then if is it the permanent haram or not, then as what's understood, Allah Ta'ala knows best, is that if he now leaves one and then goes back to the other, it's not batting basically. Now it's not mu'abbad. So he can leave one and then by way of him leaving one, he said that was haram for him, then he has relations with one, and vice versa. Now, and that's the case. So likewise as well is the case with the paternal aunt and the maternal aunt of the ama. It's the same thing applies. So the same thing applies. So he cannot now have relations with the slave girl, for example, and her paternal aunt at the same time. So it's one or the other. So the final points to mention is that the Muslim, if the Muslim is an abd, a slave, then it is not permissible for him to marry the kafira ama. Now, the kafira slave girl. So it's not permissible for him to marry the slave girl. And this is due to the ayah Allah Ta'ala states, وَلَا تَنْكِحُ الْمُشْرِكَاتِ حَتَّى يُؤْمِنُ. And do not marry the mushrikat, do not marry the polytheist women until they believe, until they embrace Islam. Now, and so Ibn Qudāmah also mentions that the hur, that is not befitting for the free man to marry the amat al-muslima illa alla yajid tulu al-hurra. So it's not befitting for the slave, for the free man to marry the Muslim slave unless he does not have that which is able to provide for the free woman. Naam. And when referring to the tool, that which is able to provide, then this is referring to what, ikhwan? No. The custom? No. Her rights? No. So if the man is a free man, but he doesn't have the means to marry the free woman, then he's able to marry the slave woman. That's when he marries a slave Muslimah. But what is it referring to? What is this means referring to specifically? Freeing her? No, we're talking about the Muslim. Is free man marrying a free woman. He's not able to marry the free woman. Or it's not befitting for him to marry the free woman. States, one is the question clear? So the free man wants to marry a free woman, but he's not able to. Oh no, he's Muslim. If he's mushrik, then there's no kalam in the first place. No, she's Muslim. So okay, free man, Muslim. Free woman, Muslim. He wants to marry, or it's not befitting for him to marry the slave Muslimah. Okay? But he's not able to marry the free Muslimah. So then now, because he's not able to marry the free Muslimah, that's when he marries the slave Muslimah. What is preventing him from marrying the free Muslimah? But what though? Now provide, but what are we talking about? Something specific. The mahar, now. So it's referring to if he's not able to provide anything for her mahar, to have her dowry. If he's not able to provide anything for the dowry, then in this scenario, he may look to marry from the slave woman. And what can he give for her dowry? Her freedom. Now, he gave her freedom, as we mentioned last week. So, and so this is upon, as Shaykh Fawzan mentioned, upon two conditions. Now, upon two conditions. The first is that he's not able to give from her mahar, give her the mahar. So, Allah Ta'ala mentions, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ مِنْكُمْ طُولًا. Who is not able from you to provide, which the tool is referring to, the mahar. And so, this is the first. The second is that the individual يخشى على نفسه العنت. Naam, the person fears for himself al-anat. And this is referring to يعني the fear in the ruku' في zina. طيب, these fears feel falling into zina. So the first is that he's not able to provide the mahar. The second is that he fears to fall into zina if he does not marry. Then he may marry from the slave woman. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. And the individual is actually permitted to marry 4 from amongst them, from amongst the slaves, if those 2 conditions are fulfilled each time. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. And we'll conclude with that point there, inshallah, and continue with an extension. It's the next chapter, which is referring to the Radha'. And it's an extension of this particular chapter here of the nikah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Jazakumullah khaira wa barakallahu feekum. Wa sallallahu wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi. Naam. Does she have an idda period? What's the one? If she's not free. Or is it in the period?
between the
Allahu A'lam. Between the two, if he has between the two, Allah knows best. I don't believe so, but Allahu A'lam. No. No.
Would not be for free man to marry a free woman based upon he couldn't give her the couldn't provide the dowry.
It's not for the free man to marry the slave woman,
But he couldn't get the free woman.
the dowry. No. No.
So, no, is that when you already got a slave?
No. No. So the person has the slave, and then he is able to fast. The problem is so
he's not able to marry another slave girl from another individual and set her free to get
he can marry from another. Is that what you're asking about?
Because I was thinking if you need another slave girl, then you have to buy that slave girl for them.
Yeah. No, exactly. He doesn't have money for the mahar in the first place, exactly. Now, so then it's referring to the. You don't necessarily have to buy her, but it's almost given. Yeah, could we say given? Allah Ta'ala knows best. But there's nothing established that she is free. It's not established that she's free. No, that's for him to establish that. No.
If a man marries a woman and she already has daughters,
Mhm.
he cannot marry the daughters. But if the marriage ends,
Yeah.
he then marries the daughters. Or
No.
permanent?
Permanent. To the extent, so you're mahram for those women. So let's say, for example, now you've married a woman, she has daughters, then you divorced this woman. You are still mahram for her daughters. So say, for example, for whatever reason her daughters want to travel, you're not no longer married to the mother, but the daughters want to travel, they can travel with you. No. Barakallahu feekum. Jazakumullah khair. Barakallahu feekum. Sallallahu barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Barakallahu feekum. Jazakallah khair.